Welcome to the WhatintheShibal podcast with Soogia and Ed.
We're just two Asian Americans talking shit about shit. Hi, Ed.
Hi, how's it going?
It's good. How was your week?
It was quick.
Yeah, I feel like in between these is like lightning speed. Anything fun?
Not too much, just trying to figure out life.
You haven't done that in the last week? What are you doing? What are you doing with yourself?
At your age, you're still figuring out? Yes. Yes, Mom, I am.
I have my in-laws in town this week, which is nice. And I love them. Don't get me wrong. They are wonderful, lovely, lovely people. But like any disruption to the schedule just feels so like I'm just so out of sorts right now. Like I don't know. I woke up this morning. I was like, what day is it? Do I have to make school? Do I have to make lunch for my kids? Where are my in-laws? Are my in-laws here? And then, so I'm just trying to get through this week.
Yeah, I hear you. I have none of that going on, and I still feel that way. Hashtag ADHD.
Right.
But yeah, well, I mean, that's fun. Did you guys do anything fun?
No, I think they're just here to just hang out and visit. So we went to my kids' basketball game, and they're, I don't know, driving up the coast today. They're old. My father-in-law is like 87, and my mother-in-law is like, I think 78 or 79. But so, you know, we just slow things down a little bit, and, you know, they just want to see the kids. They have no interest in seeing me, or even my husband, I think, to a lesser extent. I'm just like, okay, anyway, where are the kids? I'm like, oh, just take them. They're right there. So.
Yeah, I never know what to do with elderly people. I don't know.
I think they don't want you to do anything with it. They're like, leave me the fuck alone.
Well, because for instance, like a week ago, right after we recorded the last time, my mom's best friend is in town visiting her son, which, you know, I just call them my cousin just because, you know, basically. But yeah, like I went over to visit them and I didn't really know what to say or have a conversation with, because like at that point you're like, you know, you're like 50 years my senior.
Right.
So I just kind of also did the same thing. I just like focused on my cousin's kids.
Right.
And then after I went home, I was like, oh crap. I was supposed to be visiting them. I was like, oh God, she's probably going to say something to my mom.
It's like the same thing as like when you go to a party and you just like hang out with the dog. Like I do that a lot. Like I'm like, oh, okay, fun party. Don't really make small talk. I'll just go hang out in the kitchen with the dog. That's really all I do. It's a preference. But, you know, it's been nice. My in-laws both happen to be therapists though. So I don't really have to worry about navigating a conversation. They just have ways of extracting all of this from me. Like I could just sit down, look into my mother-in-law's eyes, and I'm like, so let me tell you something about it. I just go in deep, and she's like, okay. They're so lovely. They're really wonderful people. Like my father-in-law used to be a priest. My mother-in-law was like entering like the nun school. I don't know what you call it, like the nunnery, and then they met and fell in love and decided to leave the church and start a family. So I mean, I could do like a whole podcast about that. But they're very, they're really interesting, wonderful people. But
wow, but they're not one of those types of therapists, because you know, like the whole concept of your parents or someone being a therapist is that they're just constantly trying to therapy you.
I don't know, maybe, but
it's just working so well.
Right, I'm like, but I feel so cleansed afterwards. I'm just gonna fucking write it out. I'm not gonna fight it, and it's free. You know, it's not $200 an hour. It's free. It's wonderful.
Free is for me.
But then, of course, there is that whole layer of like, but they are the parents of my husband, which a lot of the conversation is geared towards and around. So I'm like, I have to be very careful with how I say things, because if I were in a regular therapy session, I'd be like, my fucking husband, who the fuck raised him? I'm like, oh shit, it's you. I'm sorry. But really, why can't he just put the sponge away? Like can you, is this like a thing? You know
that's a big point of contention. Right. You made a video about it.
I couldn't make it any simpler. The fucking sponge holder is right there in the sink. Just squeeze it, drop it in. That's all I need.
I get it. Also, taking a quick second to say hi to Rory and Rory's
Hi,
parents.
honey. I love you. Hi. You're the best. Hi, Hallie. Hi, Ray. If you're listening, everything is great. I love your son very much. He's the best. But, you know, we all have our gripes in our relationships. And there are those things. And I don't think that my husband is one of those, like, what's it called? Weaponized incompetence things. I don't think that's what's happening. There are just things that I like done the way that I like. He's so great. I actually really lucked out. He doesn't love doing laundry, but he's good at it. So I'm like, you do the laundry, I'll do some other shit, like, whatever. But there are definitely things that I'm particular about, but I don't think the sponge should be one of them. This is a universal thing. Nobody likes a stinky sponge.
It was not even just a stinky sponge. You're literally shortening the lifespan of the sponge because it's going to be gross and you're going to have to throw it out earlier.
Exactly. But we use the Scrub Daddy. I don't know if you're familiar. Scrub Daddies.
They're expensive.
They're expensive.
Yeah.
And okay, and one other thing, I'll just get it off my chest now since we're talking about it. When he washes the dishes and he washes the knives, he washes the knife blade side in and then he cuts the fucking sponge. And I'm like, Yama, what the fuck? It's not that. Turn the knife so then you don't. He's like, but I'm like, but the dirty side is, I'm like, you can figure it out.
You can clean it without cutting the
sponge.
sponge.
College graduate. I know you can do it. I know you can. Like, please. But if my biggest complaints about my husband are dishwashing related, we're gonna be okay.
Yeah, but I think that might even be like, some people just don't care about that stuff. But I wonder if some of us as Asians, we care about it because our parents conditioned us to be so neurotic with cleaning.
Conserving, saving money, ketchup, the last drop, shampoo, you got to put the water in and shake it and get every last drop of it. But, that comes from a place of, not having it.
Yeah.
So I get it. But I can't, it's hard to convey that to my husband.
No.
Who didn't grow up like that.
Well, it's because our parents instilled those anxieties onto us. In fact, as you listed every single one of those, I was like, are these things that I complain to my roommate about? Check, and check.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And then I realized too, is like, I have money anxiety because my parents have always had money anxiety. Yeah. Obviously, they grew up during the war and we're so fucking poor. And my husband, he didn't come from rich parents, but they didn't have that money anxiety or they didn't impose that anxiety onto him. So I'm constantly like, we don't have any money. We're, everything is terrible. Everything is bad. And he's like, we're okay. Like, relax. Like, we'll figure it out. I'm like, no. And I know it comes directly from watching my parents fight about money and worry about money constantly. So I'm working on it.
Yeah, and I think that also might be a cultural thing.
Absolutely,
too.
It is.
Maybe not necessarily being Asian, but at the very least being children of immigrants.
Right.
Because when you want to focus so hard in giving your children this better life, it's almost always centers around financials.
Right.
So then that's what is discussed.
Focus,
that was the priority.
Well, and that goes into this is why we study so hard. This is why education is so important because this is the pathway to getting financial stability, which is one of my biggest concerns.
Right.
It's all
which always equates to the better life for you.
Right. Exactly. But it's like, but you coming down on me so hard about studying 12 hours a day is not making my life better. It actually is really fucking horrible.
Sometimes debilitating.
Dude, my dad would lock me in a room with just a desk and just white walls and put the books in front of me like, I'll see you in 4 hours. I'd be like, and me being me, I'm like, I can't do this. I was like scratching at the walls. Like, I don't learn this way.
No.
But he didn't know another way to help me through that.
Plus they were too busy working, trying to get that, better life for us, which kind of segues into what we wanted to talk about.
For sure.
Was, the lack of representation. And I feel like the fact that our parents were working all the time is a huge factor into this trying to figure out our identity, especially as children of immigrants and maybe specifically even for the Asian community because of that lack of representation.
Right. I agree. We didn't know or how to model ourselves or who to model ourselves after, right? Because our parents were working constantly. I didn't see my parents hardly at all growing up because they were always at work. And what I did see of them was just, hardworking, do the dishes, doing all this. And they're wonderful people and wonderful role models, but they weren't American role models.
Right.
So I didn't know where to look. So then, we turned to TV, we turned to films, we turned to music channels or whatever. And then to not see yourself there at all is like, who am I? It's
confusing.
Of course it is.
Yeah, because not only are you there to try to figure out what it means to be American, but you're also trying to figure out what that means looking not white or looking like we do or looking different. So you're trying to navigate these two things. And I feel like one of those is hard to do,
right?
Let alone trying to juggle both as a 8 to 14, 15-year-old child.
I mean, even now sometimes I feel that way, and that's the thing too, is and what representation we did have was so negative and, informed us of all the negative things that people can, saw us as, or, construed us as, or whatever, however you want to phrase that, these negative stereotypes of who we are. It's like, so this is what the world thinks I am. Am I that? And I don't think I'm that, but that's how the world sees me. And so then, like, how does that kind of play into who you are, or how you want to be? I don't know. It was so complicated. It's so complicated.
Yeah, it's really complicated because your parents aren't there. Right. You know what I mean? And because maybe the outside world didn't view them as Americans, you don't look at them as like an American model figure,
right?
Going after this American dream. You just look at it the fact that like one of us is not like the other.
Right. Well, and frankly, even if my parents were there, they'd be like, well, I don't fucking know. I don't know. Right. I don't know what you are here, because I know what I am, but I brought what I am from there here. But who you are here, I don't know. And I think that was really hard for my parents too, is they really tried. They really tried to help my sisters and I like assimilate. But at the same time, they're like, we don't really know what that means. And so to them, like doing things like going to sleepovers or, having birthday parties, like my friends were having, like all these things, they're like, they didn't know what to cook for Thanksgiving. Like they're like, japchae and chickens. Like, right. It's close enough.
Yeah, yeah.
I get where you're going with that, And so that, like, even if they wanted to help me cultivate who I am and become the person that I want to be, they're like, we don't know what that looks like because we're so head down working all the time, popping our heads up. Okay, well, let's watch TV. What does that look? And then they would watch TV and be like, this is not who we want you to be either.
Right. And I think they got so hyper fixated on providing that life that I don't think they even knew who they were. Like they didn't even have time or the know-how to even think of their identity.
Right. Or I feel like for my parents, I mean, I can only speak, to my experience. I think my parents, their identity was providing. Their identity was being hard workers. That was, or if it wasn't, my mom was really good about making sure that she did the things that she liked, her hobbies. And, but I'm sure given more latitude, she would have done more with what she, wanted to do. But they, the Korean parents, they golf, they karaoke at home. Like, they still maintained that. But I think had they been given a little bit more freedom to be who they wanted to be, that would have then helped them help us.
Right.
Yeah,
I'm even starting to realize now from this conversation that I don't think my mom had any hobbies, which made it even more confusing for me because I was looking to this one adult who didn't have any hobbies. Her sole identity was being Ed's mom.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like everyone just called her Ed's mom or my Korean name, Chioma. You know what I mean? So for me, it was even more confusing trying to figure out who I am, where I come from, because the only thing I know about my mom who didn't share anything with me was just that all you need to know is that I'm your mom. That's it.
Right. That's my identity. Right.
Which means that, like, who am I then?
Right. Just your son?
Right.
Like, I get that.
And the fact that people could be multifaceted or have different interests or different parts of themselves, like, was totally alien.
And this goes back to the representation issue, right? Like, for me as a kid, my parents were like, just study. You study, you get into a good college, you get a good job, that's it. I was like, okay, but I like sports and I like acting and I like singing and doing so they would let me play sports because they knew that was good for me. But I'd be like, but I want to be in the musical. They're like, you don't have time to be in the musical. You have to work, you have to study, and you have to. I'm like, but that's what I want to do. They're like, fine, you can do this, but you have to do X, Y, and Z first. And I think for them, I was like, I like performing. I like being I like being in front of people and talking in front of people. And they were like, yeah, I don't know. There's nowhere for you in that world because there was so little representation for Asian people. They're like, there's no Asian people on TV. There are no Asian people in musicals on Broadway or like what, not like I would ever have made it. I don't know. Maybe I could have. Who knows? But it didn't exist to them.
Right.
So it couldn't exist for me.
Right.
And like that plays into like this whole idea that representation really does matter, not just for the people watching it, but for people who might want to, pursue it.
Yeah. Our parents basically had this idea of like fit in where you can fit in.
Right.
You know what I mean? Instead of being like, hey, carve out a space for yourselves. Right. And I think that was a detriment to a lot of us because a lot of us grew up in this country not necessarily fitting into that one box. You know what I mean? We live in this country where everyone else is doing all these crazy things. They're getting to explore themselves and do all of this stuff. And we're just told to be this, or this. That's it. Just stay in your lane. Don't make any any waves.
Right. And I think when like looking back on it now, and I like imagine myself just like sitting in front of a television, watching TV, like with my sister, eating Domino's pizza, praying for or getting so fired up when I saw like an Asian face like in the background of something, or if I saw, like I use this reference all the time. Like I would watch these TV shows with my grandmother, and she didn't speak a word of English, but she would watch MASH. And I feel like she would watch MASH because she'd be like, there's some Asian faces. Yeah. I see Asian faces. Yeah. I mean, imagine like to go from somewhere like so homogenous, like Korea, and then coming here and be like, I don't see any Asian people anywhere. Like that's got to be a real fucking trip. It would be for me.
Yeah.
And so, when we see things like, especially now watching, all these award ceremonies and these award shows and watching Everything Everywhere All at Once. And if you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor, go see it. You've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, and then watch it again. And maybe even a third time.
At least.
Yeah.
You need to, I think, at least watch it at least twice.
At least.
The third time, I think you catch a lot of things that you didn't catch.
Yes.
I think to me, it covered so many bases for things that I like. It was a trippy ass movie, but it really, the message I could just relate to so well, so beautifully. Like, what were your favorite things about that movie?
Honestly, it was the reconciliation between the mother and daughter. Ugh. I think because I'm trying to navigate that now even, but I had already started that journey. So it was just very hopeful. Also, it also helped me realize that maybe like I was putting my mom in a box or having certain expectations of her, which, to credit myself, my mom did do some stuff that, made me question it, little narcissism here and there.
Sure.
I hope she's not watching. But
maybe she is, and maybe this would be a good thing for her to hear.
We could hope. But it was very hopeful. You know what I mean? Knowing that someone like Evelyn could be, and as I'm even saying this, you start to realize that like they're just literally products of their own environment, right? Our parents, it was because of how they were raised, and that's not like a complete excuse all for everything they've done or continue to do. But we have to remember, like we said last time, to give them grace and to remind ourselves that they're human.
Right. And I think that's something a lot of children or, even adult children forget. And I make this such a point to my kids. I'm like, I need you to understand I am also a human being, because this is something that never occurred to me as a kid, that my parents are people. Right. They're just like, like you're saying, like it's, Soogia and Ed, like that's it. I was like, but my mom had a whole life before she had me. My mom had interests. She had dreams. And I never think about that. I never thought, like, what are my mom's dreams? What are my dad's dreams? What did he dream of? I can't talk about my parents. Always makes me cry. But like, what did he want for himself when he was a boy? Did he think about what his future was going to look like? And I never thought about that until I was well into my adulthood, and I regret that so much, because I feel like it would have given me so much more of an ability to like forgive them for the things that they didn't do or say or whatever, because I would have understood it better. And I never took the time to do that, and I regret that. And so I make it even to my girls now. I'm like, Daddy is a human being. Daddy has feelings. Daddy is going through something right now. He needs you to support him just like he supports you. And I think humanizing people in general is something that people don't do enough.
No.
And I think that's why we have experienced so many of the things that we have.
I think it's society as a whole has a problem with putting people into boxes. And when you put someone in a box, you keep seeing them from that lens only, forgetting that like all people were
multidimensional.
Deep. Yeah.
And I think that's why maybe Everything Everywhere All at Once has affected me so as deeply as it does, because the relationship between the mom and daughter was so real, and I feel like it really tapped into like not so stereotypical ideals of what, the Asian diaspora and family dynamic is, and to have, the daughter, be Asian American, but also, LGBTQ. And I think that was such a impactful and important message to make people feel more whole and human. It's like people have a lot of different facets to their humanity. And I think, a lot of people, that's how they can be, I don't know, racists or bigots or whatever, is to not see someone as a human being.
And getting stuck looking at through that one lens is, I guess, how stereotypes oftentimes happen.
Of course.
But specifically with Everything Everywhere All at Once, I think it also was a big point that they didn't make the Asian diaspora part, the difference between the mom and the daughter and their experiences being in America, like it wasn't a joke.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
right.
the accents weren't a joke. Their experiences, their point of views weren't a joke. It was very carefully and realistically portrayed from our point of view, where it's just these two people who came from completely different lives because they grew up in completely different cultures, trying to figure out on their own, assimilating into this Western country, while then realizing that somewhere along the line that they've disconnected.
Right.
And I think that's like such a honest and true story for many of us whose parents immigrated here. This idea that like, because, and I keep referencing it, but because our parents get so hyper-focused on giving us this better life, that they get hyper-focused on that while we're trying to figure out the privileges that we have growing up here. Who are we? What do I get to be? Who am I going to grow up to be? What are my interests?
Right.
And all of these things that our parents did not have the privilege of haven't even thinking of.
Right. The luxury to even consider that their life could take a different path.
So for them to even try to figure out how to manage that for us wasn't even a thought, because they're like, what is this? What do you mean identity? You survive. That's life. You know? But I think growing up in America without those representations, like, you know, we discussed on the first episode, for us, like, some of the representations that we have were nowhere near positive. In fact, one of the only, and as much as I love Kiwi Kwan, his representations in Indiana Jones and even in Goonies was stereotypical. Was he putting on an accent? No, that was true to what he was as an immigrant himself. But the way that those characters were portrayed were very one-dimensional.
Of course, right.
And outside of that, the only thing I can think of was Margaret Cho in All American Girl, which was like the first time it was normalized, but it was in the context of comedy. You know, so it's still kind of messed up.
And even still, that show was riddled with Asian stereotypes and bad accents, and the accent being the joke.
What I mean.
You know
when it wasn't that comedic thing, you're like, oh, I'm represented. A family is finally there, but
oh, I'm a joke.
Yeah,
I'm a fucking joke. You know, and I love Margaret Cho. I love her. I adore her. I think she is a fucking pioneer. I really do. And I think she got trapped in just like the machine. You know, television machine. She
did what she could with what she was offered.
Right, exactly. And it was like, I either take this chance or I respect her tremendously, but she was thrown into this thing where it was like, okay, well, I get it, and you want to be represented, but this is how we want to represent you. And she didn't really get any to say about it, but like
she didn't have any power.
When we were young, we got what? We got Data, we got Long Duck Dong, and we got who else? I can't even think of like a handful.
Yeah.
And that even is lucky, because at least those people were played by actual Asian people. Unlike, when James Hong was coming up and Asian people were played by white people who had their fucking eyes taped back. It's like, what? Right. How is this a go? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, which is like weird to hear that like Asian isn't box office, yet you were making a movie centered around Asian stories.
Right.
Like, so that doesn't make
Genghis
sense.
Khan is like not box office, then why are you making the movie at all?
Right.
Like, so that it makes no fucking sense. And so I don't know, when I see somebody like James Hong receive an award, like, at SAG, to be honored by his peers and, acknowledged by his peers who took 70 fucking years to come around to doing it, is a really poignant and important moment for him, but for all of us.
Yeah.
For all of us. And for Michelle to say, this isn't just for me, this is for every little girl that looks like me. I mean, imagine how hard I was crying when I heard her say that.
Yeah. I mean, and think about how Hollywood just like glorifies so many of that era actors, majority because they're just not here anymore.
Right.
And to realize that James Hong was their colleagues, he's still here. He gets zero acclaim. He gets zero recognition. Just the longevity and his stamina alone is worth noting.
A 70-year career in film.
Anything.
His first movie was with Clark Gable?
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. That's a really long time ago.
Right.
It was a really long fucking time ago.
Who works 70 years in anything?
Right.
You
That's
know?
a very good
Let
point.
alone, like, like when you watch the SAG Awards, you could tell that, like, he needed help just maneuvering.
Right.
To still have the passion enough. And I don't know if you read this, but James Hong said that he didn't really understand the script because it just kind of went above his head a little bit. You know what I mean?
Well, to some degree, I think that's kind of the point.
That was the point, but it was also like conceptually, it was just like so out of the box.
Right.
You know, so he didn't even understand, but he just knew that with the people that were involved,
it's important.
It's important, and he just took that leap of faith.
Right. There's something poignant about this, and I need to be part of it.
And so many of all of that should be recognized, let alone none of it.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really fantastic, and I think maybe, I don't know, the cherry on top of it for me was that Mark Wahlberg presented the award to them.
Yeah,
and I like to. If you don't know the story behind Mark Wahlberg, Ed, I think you should field this one. Tell everybody a little bit about what a lot of people are now discovering about Mark Wahlberg.
I'll touch on it, really quickly. But back in 1988, when Mark Wahlberg was still, I believe, a teenager, or like had just, become 18 or whatever, he essentially assaulted these two Vietnamese men in Dorchester, Massachusetts, which is right outside Boston. And I believe the first one was in an attempt to steal the man's beer. Mm-hmm. Mark Wahlberg was walking down the street, saw a Vietnamese man get out of his car with 2 cases of beer. For some reason, Mark Wahlberg, I say some reason, but he was looking for trouble. He's carrying a 5-foot-long stick down the street. And he, immediately points out the fact that the man is Vietnamese, uses some vulgar words, and then just without any notice, just smacks him as hard as he could on the top of his head because the man passes out. Mark Wahlberg tries to steal his beer, runs away because I believe the cops started coming pretty much immediately. Goes up to, I'm assuming the area must have a Vietnamese community because there was another Vietnamese man up the street. And Mark Wahlberg essentially uses this Vietnamese man to hide from the cops. He literally puts his arm around his shoulder, says, "The cops are coming, hide me." This man has probably no idea what's going on, let alone the fact that Mark Wahlberg just assaulted a man from his community a block away. And as soon as the cops drive down away from view, Mark Wahlberg decides that he's just going to punch this man in the face. This man,
what the fuck?
That just helped him.
What a dick.
Right. And as soon as the cops arrest him, he starts getting defensive. All of these slurs start coming out.
They're never far behind, right?
All this machoism of like, you don't need to, you know what I mean? It's just a lot of toxicity. And since then, well, actually, first off, Mark Wahlberg only spent 45 days in jail. This was actually 2 years after he also got a civil rights injunction by the courts for essentially harassing a group of Black kids.
Right, that's right.
And I believe that was actually on a school trip. Like they were going to the beach. They saw a group of Black kids. Him and his white friends decided to start throwing rocks, chase him down the street. The one woman was so traumatized, she still talks about how it affected her. She still has scars. And so this was a pattern of behavior for Mark Wahlberg. Now, the problem here is that since then, Mark Wahlberg has done a lot of behind the scenes work to try to pretty up his image. And that's the thing that a lot of people focus on whenever we have this conversation. Mm-hmm. But the points that usually get left out are for over 20 years, like 26 years, he didn't even try to reach out to either of those victims to make it right. With them. Because otherwise, unless you make it right with the victims that you wronged, you're just trying to put makeup on a pig.
Right. That's just PR.
Right. It's just PR. You're just literally cleaning up your image.
Right. Because it affected no one but those 2 people. So who are you doing it for? Like, I get it. Like, if you want to feel better about yourself, great. But start at the source.
Right.
Start at the point where all of it happened.
That thing that you're trying to cover up is called guilt.
Right.
And the best way to get rid of your guilt is to right the wrong.
Contrition.
I mean, you might never get rid of that guilt. If you're a good person, that guilt will never go away.
I don't know that I could get away with that. Get away from that feeling of like hurting somebody in that way. And here's the thing. I know that a lot of people want to say, like, he was a long time ago. He was a kid. He was in a gang. He did, and fine. I understand that. And as kids, we do a lot of stupid things. But I don't know. Like, I know a lot of people who are kids or have been kids and haven't fucking hate crimed people. And I'm sorry. And I know that that's a very, like, stern label to put on it, but I don't know what else to call it. Because in any other context, when you find two people who are of the same race and assault them and hurl racial slurs at them simultaneously, I don't know. That's how the math works out for me. And I'm not saying that he is still hateful, but I would love to see him. Why does nobody know about this?
For me, if I was Mark Wahlberg and I actually felt guilt, I would have done something at some point, even if it was just in the last 3 years when all of this hate crime towards Asian people came about.
Now's the time.
Who is the best person to speak up against it? Someone who did it before to guide people, to let them know how wrong it is.
And now understands how wrong it is and how sorry they are, and they don't want to see this happen to anyone else.
Hey, not to make it about me, but hey, I did this before, and I can tell you that it doesn't have to be this way. It's wrong. You're going to you know what I mean?
Right.
Something instead of just keeping quiet.
Nothing.
And from what I understood, the day after the SAG Awards, when people started making an uproar, I heard that conveniently Mark Wahlberg started talking that exact day about how he's Catholic. So that's what I mean. Like, those little tidbits, those little details are what makes me say that, look, I don't want to pass on full judgment. But the trails are leading towards fake.
Right.
This is fake.
Right, exactly. This is all PR.
This
Again.
is performatory.
And
performative.
I like to think that there's somebody, I don't know who decides who does the presenting for whatever awards. I know that usually the person who received the award the year before presents to the next person. I don't know. I think all these award shows are different. But I like to believe that somebody behind the scenes at SAG was like, you know what, Mark Wahlberg, you've been real fucking quiet about what's going on in the Asian community. How about instead of presenting just one Asian person with an award, you present like to a half dozen or more of them?
Let's watch you squirm.
Fucking squirm. And you could see it on his face, how openly uncomfortable he is. This is the part where you, in editing, put a picture of him.
I mean, literally right before he announced the award, he looks back and almost like, wait, are we sure that was I supposed to present this?
Well, and exactly. And some people are like, oh, this is how he's showing that he's grown and evolved. I'm like, is it though? Because growing and evolving from something would require you actually talking about it and pointing it out towards yourself and be like, listen, these are the things that I've done. These are the things that I am sorry for, and I want to address them. But I've never heard him address it. I'm sure like behind the scenes, quote unquote, whatever he's doing, in communities, whatever. But this is like a large scale thing that's a really big issue. It should go beyond, I don't know. I feel like there should be like an actual addressing to those two people.
I agree.
And I want to see it.
I agree. And it wasn't even like, great. So let's say that Mark Wahlberg hasn't done anything severely problematic in regards to race relations since. On the flip side, has he done anything to advance the needle for them as well?
Right.
That's what I mean. None. You know what I mean? So that's
not that I know.
And I'm not saying everyone's built the same or everyone tackles everything the same, but if I was Mark Wahlberg and I tremendously felt this guilt, I would almost feel like, and maybe this is the part where all of my therapists have all told me that I had some sort of hero complex, but that would be the part where I would feel like it's partially my duty to somehow rectify the wrong for the whole community.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's a hero complex. I think that's just a human being complex. You know what I mean? Like, I think that is I think at the very least is that something that you should do. I mean, as a human being, if what he did was not something small. No. What he did was not just like saying a word that you're not supposed to say because you didn't know it was something that was offensive. That's not what he did. He committed hateful crimes against people. Like, that's fucked up.
And I don't think it's even just that. People focus on his hate crime. They don't talk well enough about the part that he only served 45 days.
Right.
And then afterwards, he catapulted off of his older brother's career to become a millionaire and create this empire. That's the part that really rubs me the wrong way, is he just did everything for himself without even being like, you know what? I had this privilege. And that's what I mean. It's not that it's his responsibility per se, but I feel like he should feel some type of responsibility towards it. I mean, the one man, now there was this one rumor where they stated that the second man that he punched in the eye lost his vision in his eye because of that punch. In actuality, the victim himself stated that he lost his sight in the Vietnam War. Yeah. Because he's one of those he's one of the quote unquote boat people that escaped to Vietnam, you know? And which, you know, think about that. Think about the fact that you just fled your country.
And some fucking kid knocks you upside the fucking head with a stick.
For helping him. Unknowingly. You know what I mean? But outside of that, I mean, that man, up until like 2014, 16, was making $9 an hour doing screen printing on shirts.
Right.
And even when Mark Wahlberg was petitioning to get pardoned, he was even advocating for him.
And that's the thing too, is like, you're petitioning to get pardoned. What do you mean? You did it. So what do you mean getting pardoned? Like, that's not showing contrition. That's not showing like how sorry I am, being like, okay, well now can you just erase it? Like, I'm really sorry. Can you just take it away? Like, that doesn't show me you're sorry.
And he claims it was his team that wanted to do it, but that's what I mean when I say you have to.
Well, then surround yourself with a better team.
You have to look at the whole picture, because we're talking about someone who literally, by only serving 45 days, there was a statement made that said that Asian people are not worth. They're not worth it.
Right.
They're not worth enough for you to ruin your life over.
Right.
Like, they're just these immigrants, you know. This guy came over on a boat.
Yeah, right.
You know
he only had one good eye.
Right. So he's not even acknowledging that fact.
Right.
You know what I mean? So just even from that perspective, acknowledging his privilege, you would think that there is some sort of making it right.
Right. Well, and now what, right? Now that we all kind of, the cat's out of the bag and more people are understanding like what he actually did. Even now, if he goes back and is like, oh, I'm going to try to right these wrongs by doing X, Y, and Z, it's like, well, now it really just looks performative. Right. And now I don't buy it for a fucking second.
But at the same time, I would rather that than nothing.
There is that. And you're going to get backlash no matter what you do at this point. But I feel like that's kind of the bed you made. That's the bed you made, Marky Mark. Sorry. No, you know, put your Calvin Kleins on and go do some fucking work in the community.
And that's the thing. You would think that he would show some sort of remorse.
Right.
You know, and some sort of like, oh man, I have to do something to make this right.
Well, and that's why I kind of think that maybe somebody did this on purpose so that he would have to face it, you know, so that you'd have to say like, all right, well now, you know, you have to, because everybody knows, you know, shit or get off the pot, because now's the time. Because we've been waiting for you to do something and you haven't.
Hasn't done anything.
I know.
Yeah, I mean, has he even been in a movie with an Asian person? That's what I mean. At the very minimum, you could have been like, hey, I'm going to take this one person up with me. Like, just
or like
something.
Yeah, or produce a movie that has Asian actors in it that tell a story of, I don't know, Vietnamese boat people. Let's do a movie. Let's do it. You can do a documentary, or you can do a fictional story about it. But why don't you throw some of your fucking, you know, money behind it and get a story out?
Right. Or this is going to sound a little pompous, but like maybe just tell your story.
Yeah.
Be honest about what you did to those men, show it on film, and
oh, well, that would be something.
People.
I think that would be incredible. That I think would be, to me, because I always find that if you're going to do something you really truly are sorry, looking bad should be the least of your worries, right? It's because you already look bad.
Right.
So I think if he did that, that would be one of the only things that I would look at and be like, all right, I'm going to really consider this.
Because let me just blow the mind for a second. If you think about it in the terms of a movie, you know, Mark Wahlberg did this thing and he hit these people. What is the only acceptable ending to that movie?
He gets beat with a stick.
I walked myself right into that one. No, but it would be having to come around.
Right.
You know, it's like that Clint Eastwood movie with those Asian kids. At the end of that movie, Clint Eastwood, who was somewhat racist in the beginning and made all these, you know, he ended up sticking up for that community.
Right.
And that's what I mean. If you compare movies, and I'm not saying life is like movies, but if you compare real life to how that movie should end,
right?
What has Mark Wahlberg done?
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. Mark Wahlberg then and now, arguably same person, just better at hiding behind closed doors.
Interesting.
Arguably, right? And that's the thing is that like people like Mark Wahlberg don't realize the kind of effect it has, not even just on those two people. I mean, the first victim, no one can even find them. So for all we know, that person became a huge recluse because this thing fucked him up.
Right.
The second person, he's struggled to support his whole family this whole time. You know what I mean? So
yeah, I mean, I would love to see Mark Wahlberg do a story like that and have, and then I think that would also help with the representation aspect is like, don't represent it from just your perspective. Let's hear it from the perspective of the people this happened to, or stories like it, because I think there are so few. I haven't seen any stories about Asian people who have been affected in these ways, and I think hearing the stories from their own mouths, I think is a really important part of helping others understand their places in the world.
Yeah.
Right.
Or like maybe tell one of the victims' stories.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like show what his life was like.
I would like to know. I don't know which one of the two was the boat person, but I would. Yeah. Okay. So let's start the story there. Let's start the story in Vietnam in 1972.
That man even changed his name to Johnny. We don't even know if that happened because of this incident.
Probably.
You know what I mean? Like, oh my God.
I need to assimilate.
Right.
I need to figure out a way to make myself less me.
Right.
Right. So yeah. So let's take Johnny's story, 1972 sometime. He's probably a little kid. Let's start there. Let's start there, Marky Mark. Like, I'd love to see the story. Write it. Get somebody to write it. Not you, though. Somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, hopefully an Asian person who's actually sitting with Johnny.
Oh, let's get Johnny out here in LA. Let's have him do a little write up.
But it's even more than that, because like for those of us that grew up knowing that story, between the lack of representation in media,
right,
and then the fact that the news and the justice system is telling us that our lives
are worthless. Yeah.
It really fucks you up from a cellular level about your whole being.
Right.
And
I think those of us who have the fight in us, we push back, but that also exposes us to an entirely different scenario and group of things that, are negative. And then those of us who don't have the fight in us just sit in the idea that we aren't worth as much and that we don't deserve to be as happy as everybody else. So when you watch yourself, number one, not be represented, and the representation that you do get is so negative, and then you don't have role models or people advocating for you at the same time, it's like, well, what the fuck are we supposed to think? How are we supposed to feel?
Yeah. Yeah, and I know as a little kid, between
Don't make me think about little Ed. Thinking about baby Ed makes me cry already.
Yeah, well.
Little baby Ed.
As a little kid, between the lack of representation and the fact that, growing up with a single mother and an only child, I didn't know what to think. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what it was like to be able to defend yourself. And without going into the specifics, probably on another podcast filled with a lot of tears. The thing with is that like, when people say that you're strong, when people look at us and they're like, wow, you're so outspoken, thank you for standing up for things, it makes me sad, because in order to have strength,
where do you think it came from?
It has to come from somewhere. You have to have gone through and that's the thing is that like when you're going through it, you don't think that you're being strong. All you're telling yourself is, why is this happening to me? I'm not going to make it. This is so hard.
Right.
And it's only when you're looking back and you're wishing that this never happens to anyone else again, and no one has to ever go through it again, do you start to realize like, I had to be fucking strong.
Right. Right. As you're saying this, the image that keeps occurring to me is just like melted metal that has to just get hammered and pounded over and over and over again to become this strong piece of steel, right? Yeah. You have to just continually hammer at it in order for it to, yield its strength. And that is something that so many of us have gone through. And I totally relate to what you're saying. People say all the time, oh my God, Susie, I want to be strong like you. I want to have a voice like you. Where do you think it came from? It came from constantly having to fight for it. I still do. I have to fight people all the time just to be allowed to be who the fuck I am. And this goes far beyond, even just social media. In my life, I have to rail against everything because I feel like if I don't, people will see me as weak. And if they see me as weak, they will continue to attack, diminish, minimize, whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. And I'm so fucking sick of it. But I'd love to not have to be strong sometimes. I would love to just be who I am and not feel like I'm constantly at attention. Always feel like I'm at attention. I'm always looking for it. I'm always like, it's here. I know it's here. I can sense it.
Yeah.
You know, but that also, you know, it goes, I have to check myself too.
Yeah.
Because I understand that because I'm always so hyper fixated and aware of what's going on, that I sometimes see it in things that aren't happening.
Right.
Right? Like, this is going to sound so silly, but I've recently been doing my own fingernails and I think they look really great.
Yeah.
And I've been doing them at home. And I told my friend at the gym who's like, your nails look really pretty. I was like, thanks. I've been doing them myself. And she goes, well, shit, I'm going to start getting you to do my nails. Instantly, I'm like, oh, because I'm Asian, I can do your fucking nails, you fucking bitch. And I was like, no, that's not what she meant.
Right.
Take it back. But it's because I've been conditioned to always be at a 10.
Yeah.
She didn't mean anything by that. She was just trying to give me a compliment.
Yeah, she was like, I can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
And you've done a lovely job. They look very pretty. And I was like, very consciously like, all right, walk it back, Susie. That's not what she meant. And you have to check yourself too. Because all this pushing forward, you know, you forget that it's okay to stop or to pause or to take half a step back. It's okay. Because I've never allowed myself to.
Yeah, that's why it's like a weird thing to think about. When I think about who I am now, I'm pretty happy with the person that I am.
I think you're pretty great.
Thanks. I feel like, you know, same. I feel like I'm a decent human being. Mm-hmm. I'm flawed, but I try my best every day to be better, to own up to my mistakes and everything like that. But even as a kid, I remember thinking, because even when I was like 9, 10 years old, growing up without a father, I used to look to TV and wonder, who am I going to be as a dad one day? You know what I mean? So like I did a lot of that kind of like psychological thinking since I was a kid. And I remember even at that young age thinking to myself, I'm the way that I am. I know things. I can sense things. I have this great intuition because of the things I've been through. How do I instill that into my future kids one day without giving them the trauma needed to get here?
I struggle with that all the time. That's a really great point.
Because otherwise, like I grew up in, you know, suburbia before, amongst a very populated white area. And a lot of those kids, and I don't mean this offensively, were very sheltered. Mm-hmm. And to me, I don't know if offensive, like that's just not what I want to identify as. I don't know if I want my kids to be sheltered. And I don't know, maybe it's because I don't have kids and I don't know, but how do you reconcile giving them a better life while being able to educate them on how to pick up on the nuances of the bullshit that is known as life? It's
almost impossible. I struggle with that all the time. I really, really do. I know that when I'm with my kids and we hear something, or like I can sense it when my daughters are like, was that offensive? Did they mean that offensively? I'm like, no, they didn't at all. And I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Have I done too much? Did I let the pendulum swing too far? And now they're so aware of it and I hate it because I don't want them to have to feel how I felt, because that is where that came from. But to know that it's even in their consciousness means that I have deposited some of that trauma to them. And now it makes me so upset with myself that I allowed that to happen. But how do you teach them? Because those things do still exist.
And I think that's why the media is so important, because I think as having interpersonal relationships with your children, it's hard to show them your strength without some of the trauma that initiated coming through. Mm-hmm. Because like we had to become strong the way we are because of our life experiences. I didn't just grow up one day and I was like, this is how you're strong.
Right.
I was a sensitive kid that used to get bullied all the time. You know, as I said in the last episode, you know, physically, you know, really badly. And then I had to learn to figure out what being strong was. And that came with all of its learning curves. Like first I was a dick, you know, and I wasn't that great to people. And then I became closed off. And then all of a sudden I was a victim again, but just like in a different way. And I think that's the reason why representation is so important, because if the kids these days can see people that look like them, be strong without necessarily having to see the trauma that they go through, then they can see what strong is, but they also see that like, oh, I can be that.
Right.
That can be me.
And I think too is like not just strong, right? I want my kids to see people who look like them that are funny and who are, but not the joke.
Yeah.
They are making the joke. They are not the joke itself. You know what I mean? And well-rounded and, motivated, but not just about, academics, and that pursue art and pursue other things. Like they have dreams that they're allowed to pursue. And I want them to see like the entirety of a human being. And I think that was the one thing that we really didn't get, because all that I ever saw of people who were my age and Asian, if I saw them at all, were like bookworms. That's it. They were this.
It was through the lens of the white lens.
We are the nerd.
Yep.
And I'm like, I'm not a fucking nerd. I'm cool as fuck. What are you talking about? I hate math. I really do. And I'm an Asian kid and that I think is another thing too, is like, so many people are like, well, what's wrong with these stereotypes? It's good to be good at math. It's good to want to study hard. I'm like, not if you're not that.
Or from my experience, I was that nerdy kid, when I was in 3rd grade, I had already started learning calculus.
Wow.
My mom ran a Kumon.
Oh, cool.
And I think I also just was mathematically inclined. So those two things
could never be me.
Helped me from an intellectual standpoint,
right.
But from a integrating America standpoint, it was horrible. So for me,
did you wear glasses?
I did.
Oh, Ed.
So then on top of it, I was that stereotype. It really confused me. Because when you see that person being on the screen and they were so one-dimensionally that, and they were the butt of the joke, they didn't have any arcs, they were portrayed as never the love interest, they're just like this, this guy who just has crushes but never gets fulfilled, it made me think that was all I could aspire to be. Like, I thought that was it. That was it for me. You know what I mean? And it really helped. It really fucked me up, for lack of a better word. It made me.
How could it not?
Yeah. I mean, up until even recently, in like the last 5-10 years, I had to navigate, try to figure out who I was, to try to overcome and have to tell myself that, like, hey, man, you've been conditioned this way. This isn't where your story ends. Like, you know what I mean? We can do whatever the fuck we want. And that took a while.
I bet. I mean, we're still working. That's why we're here.
That's why we were
literally
here.
why we're here, because we're still experiencing it. And as a kid, for me, like, I wasn't studious. I really was not. I didn't like math. I
hated it.
I think I've undiagnosed like some learning disabilities, or at the very least ADHD that's undiagnosed. I'm pretty confident.
At the least.
Yeah, I think I should really get that checked out, but anyway,
yeah.
I digress. But because I never saw, especially Asian girls who were rebellious or who were athletic or who loved art.
Or was it cheerleader?
It was just piano. You only get piano or violin, and that's it. And maybe the flute if you're lucky, but that's all you fucking get. And I was like, I like dancing. I like singing. I like doing things. I love fashion. I love art. But it was like, it's either classical in whatever art it is, which I didn't love, obviously. I was a kid, and I was like, I want to be like Debbie Gibson, or I want to be on Disney Channel, or I want to pursue. It didn't even register. And I grew up in LA, and there were a lot of my friends whose parents were in the industry, who were also kids in this industry, and they were all doing the things that I was like, that looks really fun.
Yeah.
That looks like something I would want to do. I want to go on auditions. Not to say that even like now that's what I want, but like it was definitely something that I would have loved to have pursued if I were given the opportunity.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it would have been helpful for our parents as well to have had the representation.
And I think that if my parents were able to see just like well-rounded representation of Asian people in film and television, they'd be like, oh, well, maybe that's not such a crazy thing for her to want to do.
Right.
Because to them, this was just this like outlandish idea.
Yeah.
Asian people aren't on television.
No.
They don't make it as actors. They're not successful.
No. In fact, the only Asians that they knew of that were successful were in those fields of doctor, lawyer.
Right, exactly. So the only path to success for Asian people is in academia and becoming a professional in those, arenas, but not as an actor. You'll never survive as an actor. And obviously, who knows, had I pursued it, and if anything would have ever, I don't know. I don't know that I even would have gone the distance to try to do that. But just the fact that it wasn't even something that was a viable consideration,
right? Because
my parents were like, that's not a thing.
No.
That's not a thing for you, kid.
No, that's
like,
a hobby.
Sorry. Yeah, right. At best. If we even allow that.
Yeah. I wasn't.
Yeah, right. Let's see what your SAT scores look like, and we'll see if you get to have a hobby.
Yeah.
You know, and it was because they weren't exposed to people on television that looked like us. And so now, even like watching my parents see something like BTS and Korean dramas and Everything Everywhere All at Once, they can see that that's an actual thing. And so now, like when my daughters are like, oh, I want to pursue X, Y, and Z, my parents don't, well, lucky for them, maybe less me, they're like, oh, that is something that you could do. That sounds great. Let's help you get dance lessons. And I'm like, I would have liked that too, but that's okay. At least now, you know, my parents can see that I wasn't so crazy. I wasn't so crazy to want those things. And I think they have their own regrets about that too.
That's so funny. We share very similar things. When I was younger, I used to have this like, before the Home Alone, remember that little handheld recording thing?
Oh, yeah.
Before that came out, I used to have this like really big thing with a microphone and you would record on a tape deck. I used to carry that around and I literally used to sing, dance, and then I would go up to like my mom and my grandma and pretend like I was doing interviews. So like I think entertainment is something I always wanted to do too. And in fact,
same.
I even got a role in my 7th grade Beauty and the Beast play. My mom did not come. Actually, I recently found out that she secretly came to the one night. But imagine doing that in secret and not actively supporting your child.
Like what?
As a 12-year-old.
Well, because she knew that if she fostered that, then that might be something you would want to continue to do. And that in turn could then affect your ability to be
or even,
an
God
accountant.
Forbid, I was good.
Yeah,
and
right.
she didn't want to admit it. You know what I mean? But it was funny because then she told me that I wasn't allowed to anymore because it just took up too much time. But I think in reality, I think she saw how much I enjoyed it and was like, ooh, I have to cut this off now before it goes too far.
And then I really had to dash your dreams.
But if there was maybe some representation at the time, maybe that wouldn't have been such a far off thing where she was like, you know what? He could do this.
Right. Or, you know, now that you're saying these things, I'm thinking maybe they did see what kind of representation there was for Asian people and they didn't want us to be subjected to that.
Possibly.
Right? Like, I don't want my daughter to be the female Long Duk Dong. Like, I don't want that for her. So if she does pursue that, it's just going to open her up to being ridiculed publicly. Right. That's the last thing we want for her. So, you know, to see that, I mean, it's a very slow evolution going back to the James Hong thing, you know, obviously it's decades and decades, almost a century in the making. But to see these small changes and the ability for young Asian actors to be able to pursue their dreams and, you know, singers, dancers, whatever in the arts that isn't just classic piano, you know, it's really nice to see. I mean, I do resent that I am not young enough to be part of that in that way.
Are we? Really?
Do you want me to sing? Is that what you're asking?
I bet they do.
You don't want that.
Just as she sings it.
No, my God, I'd be so fucking embarrassed. I'd die. I'm like cringing out of my skin just thinking about it. Oh, I can't.
Trauma. That's just trauma.
Maybe. I don't.
We're going to go to karaoke and then I'm going to film it for you guys and you'll see.
I'm sorry I have to leave the podcast forever. It's over. Oh my God, go to karaoke.
Turning off my TikTok.
So Asian.
Yeah. Doing it.
Okay, fine. We'll go to KBBQ first. We'll get me shit faced and then we'll go sing karaoke. I'm not promising anything.
But do you know what I think is funny is that a lot of Asian parents then push instruments on their kids.
Right.
But they don't want us to be artists.
Right. It's like, you know, that's what that is.
Yeah,
right?
like that's really art. And I get that. I understand that they wanted to do it for our brain development and all that stuff, dexterity, whatever the heck it is. But it's art. Yeah,
it's
like
one of the most oldest forms of art.
Yeah. Which is funny because my mom forced me to learn the piano and the cello. And then when I wanted to switch away from the cello, because like, what 7-year-old wants to lug around this instrument that's bigger than them?
As a side note, all of these little things that you're talking about, like I just picture little Ed and I'm like, oh, carry your cello for you.
Yeah, I'm telling you, my mom did not set me up for success here. The only thing that I do credit for her is when I told her that I did not want to be skipped grades, she did listen to me.
Yeah.
Because the teachers were like,
oh God, could you imagine?
In 5th grade, the teachers were like, he should be in high school.
Oh my God.
And I was like, no. I was like, I don't know if you guys remember this. I was like, last year, I almost became a paraplegic. I was like, the year before, you guys almost had a homicide case in the stairwell after gym class. So I was like, that was with kids my own age. I was like, I'm not going to high school. I was like, I'm gonna die.
No.
As a 10-year-old, I was telling adults.
No way.
I was literally telling adults as a 10-year-old, I was like, if you do this, I'm going to die.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And my mom literally, as I'm sure, as much as her Asian motherness wanted to be able to be like, my son's in high school.
It's a risk you're willing to take.
My son graduated high school at the age of 14. As much as she probably wanted to do that,
right?
She listened.
Well, then maybe we should be happy that there wasn't an Asian Doogie Howser, because that would have been you.
That would have been me.
Except dead.
Yeah.
Potentially.
Daddy Howser.
Doogie dead. Okay.
But yeah, I wanted to go that route, you know. Right. I wanted to be creative.
Of course.
And eventually it took me a long roundabout way to get here.
Right.
I found it.
I think some of the like memories I have of like my dad, my father was a trumpet player. My father loved to sing. My father can sing like opera. Like he's a wonderful, amazing singer. And I think part of him also wishes that he was able to pursue, you know, I know.
I can't believe he didn't project that onto you when you were like, I want to go to auditions.
No.
Yes.
Because I think he was like, no, these things are things that we can't dream about. These aren't dreams we can have.
It didn't play out for him.
Right. Or that he didn't even get the glimmer of an idea that it was even a potential for him at that time, you know?
And it wasn't like hey, I didn't do it, so you couldn't do it. It was more, I think, a realistic standpoint, right?
Yeah. Right. I mean, my dad moved to the United States as an architect, you know, and that didn't work out because he couldn't get work because racism. There was no way he's like, well, then I guess I'll just pursue singing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to try out for American Idol.
You guys won't let me do this technical job that I'm trained for, but
I'm going to start gigging.
Yeah. You know? Why don't you guys just all watch me on your TV screen?
Right, that's exactly. My dad, as you know, in his 20s, who speaks little English, playing gigs at smoky nightclubs in the 70s and 80s, like, it's not going to happen.
Well, it sounds amazing.
I know. I'd be like,
but realistically.
Like, Marky Mark, write that. Write that movie, because that would be fucking awesome. You know, but I think he just was like, this isn't something that we can indulge ourselves in. So
it's a pipe dream.
Yeah. So let's not. Let's do something that we know is the thing that will help you.
As they went home and watched K-dramas on their VHS that they rented from the grocery store.
Which is so fucking insane to me. I'm like, you know, those people that you're watching are artists. That's what they do.
Yeah.
But, you know, they couldn't connect the dots in time.
But I get it.
But, you know, but I think now when my mom talks about like my TikTok, or she talks about like my podcast, or like the potential of me doing X, Y, and Z, she gets really excited and she's like super proud. And I'm like, oh, Mom, like, can I compete now with your doctor friends and your friends' kids who are lawyers and blah? They're so boring. They're so fucking boring. Do they have 1.7 million followers? Like, I do? No. And my mom thinks it's so fucking cool. And I think that's so cute that they think it's so cool, because they have no idea.
My mom knows about my TikTok, but I haven't told her about the podcast yet. I think there's like a couple things. I think I'm partially scared she's going to hear it.
But I understand
that's like giving your parents your therapy.
I know.
If such a thing existed.
Which is really funny that you say that, because I just told my dad about the podcast and he's like, oh, I want to listen to it. And he was so proud because he found it like, you know, on a podcast. He took a picture of it and he sent me the picture. And I realized that in that episode that he's listening to, I talk about men having sex with farm animals. And I'm like, oh no, he's gonna hear me say the word sex. He's gonna hear me say fucking animals, and now he's gonna listen to this one and hear me say it again. But even still, I know, like, I've conditioned my parents enough to know that like they're fine with it, because this is just who I am. And I think getting to that point with them, for them to be like, okay, you are who you are. Pursue what you want. We can't fucking stop you anyway.
Yeah.
What a relief. Finally.
I think the other part of it for me is that like I'm waiting for it to be something that she could viably tell her friends about.
But even just having it.
No, I know. I know realistically that's how it is. But because when I was like 10 years old and I'd come home with a B, like on a test or something, my mom literally at the age of 10 would be like, so-and-so's son just bought him a car. I'd be like, How do I compete with that? I'm 10 years old. I'm 10 years old. You know what I mean? So it's like,
do people who get B's are they not able to buy cars?
So I think I'm still just conditioned to be like, I can only tell my mom when it's something she can viably brag about. You know what I mean?
I mean, I don't know what your mom's friend circle looks like, but if your mom's friend circle looks anything like my mom's friend circles, all of her friends, I get it. They're all doctors. They're all lawyers. They're all accountants and CPAs. I think one of her friends' kids works at the FBI, and that's fucking cool. But they're all just kind of like just doing that. I think because I do something so different from what all of her friends' kids do that my mom is like, oh, now this is something we can talk about. My daughter does something that none of your kids could fucking do. You know what I mean? Like, if I really wanted to right now, I could go to law school and become a lawyer. I don't want to, but I could. But could her kids say that they could start a TikTok and acquire millions of followers and do a podcast that people probably want to listen to? I don't know.
Or just have anything interesting to even talk about.
Right, exactly. Right. I don't know. I don't know if they can say that.
Not that I think we're interesting.
Or that lawyers aren't interesting.
Yeah. I call my lawyer friend all the time.
We chat all the time. My sister's a lawyer. So maybe that's another thing too.
Well, that's where your trauma comes from.
Right?
Yeah.
Oh, this all makes sense now. Fuck lawyers. No, I'm just kidding. It's because my sister's one. No, but I think maybe that has part of it too, right? Like my sister became like she has a PhD. She's a lawyer. She's a professor. She's all those things. So I was like, well, does that mean the pressure's off now and I can just kind of do what I want?
Talk about really embracing the first child thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah. She's such an overachiever. My younger sister is too. So I'm like, so just let me be an artist. What's the problem? Like, how beautifully well-rounded a family. I don't
know if you watch those TikToks, but the middle child is always the problem child.
Yeah, duh.
They're always the indifferent.
Yeah, duh.
The weird ones.
Okay, but this is this is not my fault. Okay, my older sister is this crazy overachiever. She went to the most prestigious university. She has a PhD. She's a professor, a lawyer. She works in like pharmaceuticals. Like she does all this crazy shit. My younger sister is this like super motivated type A MBA, like business minded person. And I'm just like, I like singing and dancing. I like painting stuff. I like just hanging out with my friends. Like my parents are like, oh God. But no wonder I'm the way that I am is because I'm like, pay attention to me.
Yeah.
Somebody, I'm pretty average at most things, but pay attention to me for something.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like,
I just realized that's the way that I am too. Holy shit. I just had one of those like,
that's called an epiphany.
Yeah.
Like, oh shit, I am that.
I was like, I'm not a middle child. Well, if you count my half siblings that I didn't grow up or know, technically I guess I am. But because my mom, like I used to beg my mom to play games with me. Like, hey mom, play Monopoly with me. And she used to be like, no.
I don't.
So same thing. I was like, somebody pay attention to me, please.
Little Ed, everything. I'm like, I'll play Monopoly with you, little Ed.
Next time we're gonna just flash photos of me on this screen and we're all gonna cry. Yeah, we're all just gonna cry.
Okay, so that was a good episode. I feel I always know when the episode's winding down because I feel like, I feel so relieved.
Like, oh my God, is this what it feels like to not carry around baggage?
I know, right? Just drop them. I feel great.
Moving forward, we want to include everyone in this conversation.
Right.
Because it's not just about sharing our experiences and our point of views.
Right.
It's about the collective community.
Right. So something we want to do is include you and have you all do like a write-in. And every week we're going to give you like a prompt about what we want to talk about, in the following episode. And then that way we want to hear your stories too. Ed and I have only lived one life each. So I think we only have a finite number of stories and not all of them are wildly interesting. So we'd love you guys to help co-host the show because we want to hear your stories, the funny ones, the sad ones, the scary ones, the inspiring ones. We want to hear all of your stories too. So next week, we want to focus on food, which is something that I talk about quite a bit. I
eat a lot of it.
Right. I eat it like pretty much every day.
All the time. I think about it literally all the time.
Yeah. So we want you to write into our email, which Ed has set up, which is...
It's going to be prompted right here on the screen. It's WhatintheShibal@gmail.com.
Perfect. And we want to talk about maybe your experiences with cultural foods, whether it be, lunchroom stories or how you were introduced to certain foods or something like that. Just tell us your funny or interesting food stories.
Mail that in. And then moving forward, we want to be able to share those stories with the audience.
Right. And make sure, too, if you write in into, if you want to be tagged or if you want to remain anonymous, great. But if you want to share your story and you want us to, talk about it, and we do, make sure you give us any social media handles that you might want us to mention. Okay. But I think we're good for the week.
Yeah.
I feel very accomplished today. I don't know why.
Hey, Mark, if you want to be on this podcast, WhatintheShibal@gmail.com.
# do better. But thank you guys for tuning in and listening this week. We really appreciate it. We've had such great feedback about the podcast. So, that just motivates us to keep going.
Yeah. And if you are watching us on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, like the video, follow us on our socials as well.
I'm at Soogia1 on TikTok and on Instagram.
And on pretty much all of it, I'm at Etch-a-Sketch with a J. And they're going to be prompt on the screen this time as well.
Ed, you didn't do one button this whole time. One noise button. You didn't even do one. What's it going to be? We won't know until it airs.
It's crickets. I know what it is.
You did the cricket ones on purpose. You set me up.
Next time, we're gonna work harder on incorporating some sounds, maybe some
Just push one. Yeah, I don't know.
I think that's applause.
What was it?
I don't know. If it is, this is me just basking in the applause.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys next week.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Good. Perfect.
Yeah.
What was the button? Now push all the buttons. Push them all. Do it.
Oh, they stay on for while they close. Oh, that's good to know.
Wait, what?
Oh, that one lasts a while. Oh, okay.
Oh, so you know when it's done. Genius.